At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Welcome. Today's podcast is really unique. Today I have the privilege of sharing with you the insights from the most sought after advisors in our industry. This is not what I expected it to be. It's even better. And the reason for that is this is what you need to have in place if you want to have a high performing team. Let me explain. A lot of brands that I work with talk about how they have a high performing team, but they're not working in unison. They're not all on the same page. That requires something special. And what Brad helps companies do today, my guest, he helps those brands leverage those strategies to become far more than just a single individual or a group of individuals on the playing field. He uses a lot of metaphors. And so you're going to want to pay attention to what he says and how he says it, because this impacts everything about your brand. Every brand wants to be great, but not every brand can be. The difference between a brand that's good and a brand that's exceptional is the team that supports them, the team working in unison. It's not always that you have the very best players on your team. He makes a lot of sports analogies, but that you know how to leverage the best that every single person on your team has to be able to succeed. In other words, this is how you win the game. These are some of the best strategies that I've ever heard about how you leverage the people around you, the resources around you to grow and scale your brand. How an effective advisor can help you as a leader focus on the things that really matter and overlook the things that aren't going to help you in the long run. How they can help you in difficult times, help you work through things. This is why everyone needs an advisor. One of my favorite quotes is an old African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's exactly what we're talking about today. How do you leverage the strengths of the people around you, of the resources around you, to grow and scale your brand? As always, I appreciate you for being here. And as you know, at the end of every podcast episode, I always share one easy, quick to download strategy that you can instantly adopt to make your own. Today's strategy is actually going to be a tool, a really cool tool that's going to help differentiate your brand from other brands. We talk a little bit about it during the podcast. So what is it? It's a trade promotion ROI calculator. You heard me correct. A tool that's going to allow you to determine how effective your promotions are. This is the best way to grow and scale your brand. If you want to learn more about it, there's a great article on my website that I recently posted about how to maximize your trade marketing ROI. More importantly, there's a button on my website to actually access the tool, so you definitely want to check it out. And there are great instructions that you can simply follow so you can get the most out of it. Now, here's Brad Barnhorn. So everyone, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to first start by saying thank you to Brad for being here. I'll introduce him in a minute, but Brad is one of the most sought after advisors in the industry, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have him available today. So thank you. So let's get started. So leveraging wisdom to unlock the full potential of your leadership and your brand. And we'll talk a lot more about what that is and what that means and why that matters. But first, I want to thank all the companies that have leaned in and are helping me support this weekly webinar series, this free weekly webinar series. So we've got Plant-Based Solutions, ECRM, RangeMe, PromoMash, Whole Foods Magazine, Phil Lempert, the Supermarket Guru, the Produce Moms, Food Business Success, Bricktown Group, Big Orange Production, C-Suite Radio, C-Suite Network, Force Brands, and Social Nature. And thank these people. Reach out to them, support them. And again, what's great about them is that they're helping me provide content. And in addition to that, they're helping make this available to a larger audience because, we rise together. So with that said, my mission is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by helping you get your products onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, including online. And Brad's mission is to unlock the full leadership and brand potential to drive current and future success and make it fulfilling and enjoyable journey along the way, which I think is really cool because it fits so nicely with what we're doing. So wanted to say, please help me raise the bar by sharing these resources with the retailers and brands wanting to grow and scale. We're here for you. You're not alone. And with COVID and everything people are concerned about, I leaned into that and started doing this free weekly webinar series. And so with that said, What keeps you up at night? What are the things, the bottlenecks, the pain points that you want me to address, that you want me to reach out and find experts like Brad to come in and talk about? In addition to that, make sure you listen to the Brand Secrets and Strategies podcast and the YouTube channel, where I may solve some of your most pressing bottlenecks as well. There's a wealth of information out here, and please take advantage of it, because that's why we do this. So as far as the weekly webinar, you can go to the calendar by going to the events page of my website. It's also the speaking page. And the next one's going to be how to maximize the real value of your brand. Another great guest, Eric Skay, who is a master brand builder. So you're going to definitely want to attend that one. And the one after that is with social nature. How are natural CPG leaders adapting to the new retail environment? So you definitely want to attend to that one. And they're going to be sharing a study about how how brands are looking at what's going on with COVID and connecting with consumers, et cetera. Then the week after that, I'm actually going to be sharing the presentation that I created for the Canadian Organic Trade Association breakfast. I was actually supposed to be the speaker there, but because of Expo West, that was canceled. So one more quick slide. This is something Brad and I were talking about when you came on. There is a free trade promotion ROI calculator on my website. I'm just pointing this out because this is something that's going to help you level the playing field. This is something that's going to give you a significant competitive advantage across all different channels. And so check it out. You can see the arrow. There's a radio button on my website at the top of my website, or you can go to promotion ROI, the front slash promotion ROI. And there's a short video there to show you how to use it. And so with that said, I'm going to end the screen share and we can get started. So anyhow, as I mentioned today, I am absolutely thrilled to have one of the most sought after advisors in the industry available to talk to you today and to share some of his thoughts and his wisdom. So Brad, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you're at today? And again, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks a lot, Dan. And it was funny that one slide about succeeding and enjoying the journey along the way. Someone asked me 5 or 6 years ago, because I work as an individual. I don't have a company. It's me. And I was doing a business card, which I don't think I have anymore. But and I was thinking about to put on it. And I had something about building awesome brands and awesome companies. And then I just said, that's part of it. The other part is having people have an awesome experience of being awesome. There's nothing that's more frustrating to see an entrepreneur or a team winning in the market and internally not having fun, not enjoying the work together, not enjoying each other, just surviving internally, either they're thriving externally. So, my goal is really to create real healthy, sustainable companies and brands that are sustainable internally as well. So thanks for highlighting that element to it. So, I came in the food space. Like actually, I'll try to be quick, but it's interesting given your ROI.
Take your time.
So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio on a street, which was a Procter & Gamble International Rotation Street. It just happened my neighbor, a couple houses down, was the CEO of Procter & Gamble. So from very early in my life, I was hearing about Procter & Gamble, and obviously it's a consumer products company. In food also at that point, they were in Pringles and Duncan Hines and Jif and Crisco. And always hearing about Procter & Gamble. And he used to joke with me and saying, someday you'll lead Procter & Gamble. So when I was at UVA back in the late 80s, he called me up and asked me, I didn't want to go back to Cincinnati. I wanted to get out of town and go somewhere else. I ended up in California where I am right now. But he asked me to do a summer internship with Procter & Gamble and ended up being out of the Atlanta office in their food products group. So I spent a summer at 20 years old in Birmingham, Alabama, selling Crisco, Pringles, Jif, and Duncan Hines. And, a lot of the selling tools, which even your ROI, your trade spend calculator and trade spend teachings work around. I remember doing one-page sales sheets on a piece of paper, writing down on a display. Here's the cost for display. Here's your incremental lift. Here's your dollar return on it, and selling displays, especially around the Crisco race car, which they sponsor in Alabama. The Crisco race car, when it came down for the Talladega 500, was quite a promotional vehicle to come to your store. And they'd buy 500 cases of Crisco to do a display on that. So started in that space and did that internship. Didn't come back to the food space for 10 years. Went on to a life in strategy consulting, backpacking, ran up coming hungry for a while for the government. I went back to business school at Stanford. And then when I came out, I was in San Francisco and was noticing that Odwalla trucks running around San Francisco. And I never thought about the fresh juice category, was not aware of it. And I was doing a couple projects with this consulting firm that involved, one was with a company in this thing called the Emerging Natural Channel. This was 1995, 96, when there were 40 Whole Foods, a lot of mom and pop independent natural food stores. And that was one project. So it was focusing on the natural space and what that meant and what that channel, which wasn't a channel at that point, it was a collection of stores. And then additionally, another project with a company called Eagle Snacks. Actually, it was Anheuser-Busch, and they were looking at buying Eagle Snacks, or selling Eagle Snacks. Sorry, I apologize, selling it. And as part of that project, we really had to understand the distribution system, the DSD model of Anheuser-Busch, and how a new acquirer could replace that. And Odwalla's business was about natural products and building a great brand, but also the DSD system to enable it. And so I really started noticing that space, decided to build a company in that space, moved to Chicago. It was a regional play at that point, 14-day shelf life. You had to build your own plant regionally, you had your own distribution system. Went there and built that. And we had a great run. And in 2000, we merged with Naked Juice. And that combined company was then acquired by Pepsi in 2006. Fast forward a couple of years. In 2009-10, I started doing advisory work. And I didn't plan to be a professional board member, which is what I've become. I just loved working with companies. I love building brands. I think I was still tired from building my own brand 10 years earlier. It's a pretty exhausting process. We went from 0 to 20 million in 2 years, and $1 million in capital. So it was a quick run, and it was all out. And also from my consulting career in the past, working with portfolio companies at one time, which allows you to pattern recognize across companies and cross-fertilize ideas across companies. And so I love the portfolio, having a portfolio, and I love building companies. And I just ended up falling into this role of really working with high-performance CEOs to help them build their companies in a very engaged way. So when I'm on a board, it's not because I invest capital. In fact, I think of what I do as an intellectual capital investor, not a financial capital investor. I'm doing the same thing a private equity fund or an angel investor is doing. I'm looking at a company and trying to pattern recognize the variables that I think will drive success, or where I can help them improve and strengthen those things. And I'm investing my intellectual capital, being my, not time is part of it, but really is, past, knowledge built over time, network, insight, judgment to really be there alongside a CEO to help them navigate building their company. And
Love that.
Yeah, so that's what I do.
No, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that sort of really began in earnest in, like I said, 2010, 2011. And was fortunate to have some great early successes in terms of Crave, which we sold to Hershey, and Kavita, which was sold to Pepsi, and have had a nice run in terms of just building great companies. Some can decide to continue independently and just keep building, and some take the exit route. There's no one right outcome for a company. Although once you have investors, you probably have to create liquidity at some point. But different CEOs, different goals, and my job is to work with them on refining those and clarifying them, both high level for what they want out of the business, but also within the business and certain parts of the business, and then ultimately work with them to achieve those outcomes.
That's a lot. So thank you for sharing all that. That's a lot to unpack. Actually, I used to compete against Eagle Snacks years ago. And Odwalla was, Odwalla. No, Naked Juice, excuse me. That was one of my favorite until they got rid of my banana chocolate. That's a whole nother story. But DSD
I wasn't responsible for that. That was not
me.
No. I'm with you on the banana chocolate.
Yeah, that was amazing stuff. I wish someone else would come up with it. But I love the fact that you framed all this. And one of the things, let me go back a little bit, is that we're doing, a lot of people think that a lot of people are trying to change natural into a mainstream type mindset. That's not what this is about. It's taking the key learnings from mainstream and bringing them into natural, and then changing them or modifying them so that they work for this industry. And so we're not trying to take natural out of natural, but my point is there are a lot of things that you can learn from your competitors, any competitor. Even in competitors in different spaces, like you said, the cross-fertilization. I like the way you talked about that. So as you're working with these different brands, and you've talked a little bit about your experience, Brad, what are the things that you do as an advisor that you would do that would be different than if you were inside as a CEO? So
Yeah.
let's frame that part of the conversation first.
As a board member, what I'm able to do is versus a CEO needs to be deep in the business and executing day in and day out. I can sort of keep a little distance from that and hold space for questions that a CEO may not have time to ask themselves or may not have time while they're executing and leading a team. So I'm always sort of what I always say is I'm holding a space to question things in a way that includes different possibilities in what the business is currently doing. I mean, I think the toughest thing about being a CEO and why people say it's so lonely is a CEO needs to have 50% of their brain on the current business model and executing it, 50% saying, what's wrong? What can I do better? Things that they can't even talk about with their team a lot of times. I mean, a lot of times it might be a decision on a senior leader and their effectiveness or how they're doing things. But if you aren't ready, so I provide a place for them to talk about things that aren't ready for prime time, so to speak, in terms of they're just not developed enough to sort of sit with the senior team maybe and talk about, or with an investor group to talk about. And so I'm helping them really refine and get clarity for themselves on where they stand on things or the key questions that they want to bring forth to a team or set of investors. So a lot of it is really, like I said, it's building clarity. And I always think there's two types of clarity for a leader. And this is an interesting one that I think about a lot. There's intellectual clarity, which comes from analysis and the left brain side of really thinking through things. And then there is a deeper intuitive clarity. And, when you see a great leader, you see that intuitive clarity. It's for example, when COVID hit, certain leaders intuitively knew how they want to treat organizations. They were like, no, here's the way we're going to treat people, respect people. Here's what we're going to do. Other leaders had to be more process driven and go, okay, what are the processes? They didn't necessarily have that intuitive sense of how they wanted to be or show up. So, I also want to work with leaders to help them build their intuitive sense of clarity so that decisions oftentimes are much easier when you really know your own value set. You really want to know how you want to show up. And so it's sort of a left brain, right brain integration. And that word's a big word for me. Integration is something I think about a lot too. You talked about natural channel and mainstream. The power of a company, if you can combine, this went back to my thesis when I built the juice company 24 years ago. I wanted to combine the natural channel thinking about Walla and how you build a brand that is fun and playful and speaks to this new emerging natural consumer, but underneath it have a steely, tough DSD business. And DSD, direct store delivery, is tough. When you're running a distribution system, we had 50 trucks over 2 years. So we were running a distribution system, which is all about analytics, all about your size per drop when you stop that truck. It's all about how many stops you can make on a route. So the power in a business to me is be able to combine that front-facing consumer sort of touch, feel, emotive side that makes people really align with the brand and really want to support a brand with underneath it great execution. And whether it's in trade spend, whether it's in margin generation in terms of how you operate your supply chain, that integration of left brain, facts, right brain, emotion, when those two come together in a business, like an Applegate Farms, or you could go through other brands like a Kind Bar, that's power. That's when you see an incredible consumer ramp and a business able to scale with it because they're being operated very effectively. So that combination is that's where I think the strength and power is what I focus on.
I love that. And actually, I'd never thought of DSD as being that way. I mean, as a former DSD driver, I learned a lot. By the way, back up a little bit.
Yeah.
When you were talking earlier, I had the vision of Lucy sitting at the psychology stand, 5 cents, about, the CEO psychologist. But that same idea about bringing out the intuitive, I absolutely love that. And the reason for that, and again, that gets back into why we're having this conversation. The processes that the big companies use are unbelievably robust, and they are so fantastic at being able to ensure that their people are well trained. And again, the amount of money, the amount of effort that's spent in training. The point is this: if you can leverage those kind of insights in your natural brain, you can get a lot further. That's why I wanted to talk to you. And so what we're talking about today is being able to tap in to those awesome capabilities of experience that a larger brand would have, and then layer that on with the different experiences within natural. So back to the DSD thing, I think about the successes that I had as a former grocery manager, and how I more than doubled my route in a few months, et cetera, and what I was able to achieve. But yet I never really thought about all those other intricacies in terms of how that plays and the execution point to you're exactly right. And again, thank you for sharing this. I never thought about the logistics and the execution being such a critical part of what I was doing. But yet that helped me better understand those dynamics when I started carrying a bag for Unilever, became a category captain at Kimberly-Clark, et cetera. And it's helped me define this. So now that we're talking about what's the difference in a board member and a CEO at the actual brand itself, how do you help guide a CEO? The fact that you said that 50% of their time is thought in solving problems. How do you support them? First of all, I'm trying to think of how I want to put this. How do you ascertain, how do you help them put the problem in, or define the problem in solvable terms that you can help them with? How about that?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a partnership. And by that, I mean, you take any great tennis player, any great golfer, and they have a coach. I mean, whether they're Tiger Woods or they're Roger Federer, whether you are any great athlete, you are looking for someone who can be there, not to teach you how to hit the shot or the basics, but someone to help you understand the flow of the game you're playing and understand the bigger picture. So, ultimately my work is more directed by the CEO than by me. I don't come into a company and say, here's the 5 things we need to focus on. I'm stepping into the game that's already in flow. I'm stepping into a river that's already moving. I don't work with early stage startups necessarily. I come on the board of companies more when they're in the called $5 to $15 million range, $5 to $20 million range. So they're already in market. They already are showing some level of success, whether it's a regional presence, whether it's a certain channel they've built, whether it's a first product line they've built. They may have some team built. Maybe they have a full team in place, but maybe they have a great head of sales and a good ops person, and marketing is where they haven't developed the business. Everyone I work with has different dynamics about what's in place. If you think about a perfect company, right? A perfect company has a fast-growing business and a huge white space. A huge white space means there's a lot of growth for the category and a lot of growth for the brand. They have a fully developed team. They have a perfect supply chain. They have great investors who want to give them endless amounts of capital. That's the ideal. That's pretty rare. That is a proverbial unicorn, at least not in terms of size, but in terms of capabilities. So when I come on a board, normally there's a few of those variables in place, but they're good variables. And ultimately for me, it's about the CEO and ultimately feeling someone I can work with. So that's my main point of contact in a business. It's the CEO in the world they need to lead, both internally in organization, the board, and the external environment. I got to help them navigate all those things together. Go back to the core question, Dan. I know I went up a little there. Bring back the core question to me one more time, and let me cycle back in on it.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to get back there again. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm a CEO. Let's say you're working with me.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know. And so how do you help me think about where the puck is going
Yeah.
so that I can avoid that problem down the road? Or maybe frame it a different way. You see a bottleneck on the road, on the road ahead. How do you help me navigate around that, even if I'm so focused, so laser blind, focused, blinded by everything else,
Yeah.
that I don't have the ability to see that? How do you help me navigate that?
Yeah, I'd say first a very simple concept, which every leader I think values so deeply, is just listening. I mean, like I said, I am not going in there to impose a uniform, single Brad Barnhorn model of building a company onto a company. I'm there to understand that company's unique situation, the unique people involved, the unique category, the unique moment in time, right? In the macroeconomic sense, how you build a company right now is different than how you build it 2, 3, 4 years ago. And in truth, the first later will change. So I'm there really to listen and really hear what's driving a CEO's thinking and what his business specifically is facing. And within that, with really a direction set by the CEO of the territory of where we're going to be exploring, then within that, diving in and bringing calibrated examples from other businesses I work with. I mean, a lot of it is not, I never breach confidentiality, but I'm sharing insights. At any one point I'm on 8 boards right now. At any one point in time across those 8 companies, I'm inherently dealing with pretty much every issue of growing a growth stage food company or beverage company, whether it's one company's raising capital, the other company's, like I said, hiring a senior team, the other company's building out a field sales team, next company's trying to get cost of goods right, next company's trying to figure out trade spend. So at any one point in time, I have the benefit of really seeing the whole business across these different companies and diving deep in those areas for each of those companies individually. And for any one company, over time, all those areas are going to be approached. Because once again, I'm basically helping the CEO deal with the issues that he has to deal with. So, and a good CEO deals with every issue in a company ultimately. So it's pattern recognition to think about programs and process and strategy that maybe they haven't thought about, or it's there to help them amplify and think about the execution of a strategy they are thinking about. So it really is filling in, the white spaces in their own thinking or their own approach, not out of weakness. It's not a weakness. I work with very high performance CEOs. Just there is, for any one of us, there's so much else out there that we can't see. So I'm just one more person for them to hopefully double their effectiveness.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it really is. It's interesting going from being a CEO to being a board member. You go from being a decision maker to being an influencer. And that's a tough transition for a lot of people. I mean, there are times when their decision a CEO might make where my sense is, even after we've discussed it, I might do slightly different color of that decision, or how I execute it might look differently. My job is not to hold on to that. My job is then to say, okay, the ball's moved from here to here. Now, how do I optimize the ball where it is for the CEO there? And so I really need to retain a real good emotional sort of separation from the business. That's not different than passion, not different than being there 24/7. Just means I can't hold a decision that was made by CEO that might have been a little different flavor than I would have done it, and keep coming back to like, well, you should have done that. Never say that. Never. It's about, okay, we make a decision. Now, how do you optimize that from that point on? Next decision, how do you optimize the business from that point on? And so that's once again, maintaining that neutrality. And once neutrality, not in terms of not caring, neutrality in terms of just staying in the middle, is an important role, because as CEO, you emotionally, it's natural. It's natural. This is your life when you're a CEO, and there's people involved, and there are moments of conflict and moments of deep challenge and moments of doubt. Those are all there. So what I'm there is to maintain a baseline through it all, and really just listen and never say right or wrong. I never say that's wrong, that's right. I say I can always understand why CEO made a decision once I understand how they work and how they think. If you're a CEO, and this is going to sound a little deep, but if you deep down in your life have a fear about whether you're good enough for the role, yeah, it's not surprising that sometimes you might take the credit for something when it would have been better to share it with the team, because you're yourself trying to feed yourself. And I did a lot of work in something called NeuroLinguistic Programming, not to get too psychology based, but this is all about sort of how our beliefs and how our identity shape the way we view the world, which makes total sense. If you think the world's a certain way, you will tend to sort the world and say, oh, there's proof that people can't be trusted, or there's proof that no one gives me sufficient credit for the work I do. So I oftentimes work with CEOs at very deep levels to uncover those core structural beliefs that are then creating behaviors and decision strategies which aren't working for them. And it's just like in a business, right? If you have a business and your basic price value of your product doesn't work, you can demo all you want. You get all these strategies to work around that problem. Demo, you can trade spend, you can pay lots of slotting. You're just going to be burning a lot of capital and probably not winning. So I'm a believer that once you get the structural thinking right in a company, in the structure, or in a person, once their structural beliefs work well, then decisions and behaviors sort of flow out of them very naturally. And so I do some pretty deep work that that crosses the personal and professional line, because as a CEO, the two are really indistinguishable. How you are as a person will show up in how you are as a CEO or as a leader. And so that's territory that's really important to me, especially if you want to enjoy the work, right? Going back to the core premise, it's not just about building great companies, but having someone enjoy that process, having them grow, having me grow. We're all evolving. We're all teachers. We're all students. We're all givers. We're all receivers. And so the power of that, and knowing that you're on both sides. I don't think a lot of CEOs feel they need to have all the answers. They need to do all the teaching. They need to do all the directing. And so, my model for an organization has always been a servant leader model. As a leader, you're at the bottom of that organizational pyramid. You're there to support those, that work for you, not the other way around. So that's always been, for me, a core philosophy. And the way you do that as leaders is by really clear defining who you are, clear defining your vision for the business, clearly building great process that the team can work with across all parts of the business. I find process is rather sexy. I mean, when you put in a good process, when you put in a good trade spending tool, or you put in a good rule on how to think about entering a new account and the cost to enter and what the payback period is on that investment and slotting fees, et cetera, and your team starts using that and builds a common language about how to think about decisions, all of a sudden, it's amazing how much an organization starts to move more efficiently and more quickly in the right directions. And I used to love when I led companies, if I could build a tool which allowed someone to be more efficient in their part of the business, and someday they come back to me and argue for a result. Like, for example, we had a little anecdote. We had in the direct store distribution business, we had routes and drivers, and we had rules on how much volume an account needed to have for us to stop the truck there, basically, to put it in very simple terms. And typically, when I first started, the very experienced route drivers would come to me and say, "Hey, Brad, I'm driving right by that little store. I can just pop in there and I can drop off some product." And that's how I did it my previous DSD job. I had a model which was more based on profitability and saying, "Hey, it's not just a marginal cost to stop there. We got to include all the cost of that truck to be on the street in the first place. We got to fairly burden that account with a true cost to have that truck out there. Because sooner or later, if you had a lot of extra marginal stops which aren't that good, you have but too many stops, got a new truck." And it was great to see a driver come back to me and go, "Brad, we shouldn't, 6 months later, Brad, there's this account. You know what? We shouldn't stop there." And they basically taken the thinking that I had to do, because I was thinking about the overall P&L and what percent of cost revenue my distribution cost could be, that there was a big picture, had to drill it down to process about how to think about a single account, whether to stop there or not. But when the team adopted that thinking, all of a sudden it wasn't an emotional decision even. It wasn't like, "But Brad, it's a really da-da-da-da-da-da-da." It was like, here's the numbers, here's the analysis, it doesn't meet the hurdle. I might even then ask, "Hey, is there a reason we should stop there? If it's the Museum of Modern Art, is our brand a good fit for art, and we want our brand to look in those settings?" I'm all of a sudden the one start to argue to break the rule. So process to me is a beautiful way to build a common language within a company. And as much as CEOs want to figure out how to run their business, the bigger challenge in scaling a business is how everyone else think consistently within a business like the CEO. And that's a great gift for CEOs, when you can take your knowledge and put it into process and really teach and build a single organism as a company versus, I used to talk to private equity funds about doing diligence on companies. And I said, you want to do good diligence, go out, talk to the CEO about his strategy for how they're building a market or how they're treating a retail customer, think about it, and then go out to a field salesperson or go out to 3 or 4 and see if you get the same answers to those questions. If you get different answers to that question from each of the field salespeople, how they think about slotting dollars or trade spend, then you're really operating 4 or 5 different businesses. Or if you have 100% sales team, 100 different businesses, and that's not going to be real efficient. You want to build a single business with a single way of thinking, and that's what great process does.
Love that. So process equals common language. That is so critically, I could not agree with you more. That is so critically important. I love the fact that you were able to get into this. And from my perspective, Brad, this is what makes natural. The big brands are so focused on what they would call process, but they're very siloed in their objectives and their thoughts, et cetera. To your point, I believe, by the way, I'm a disciple of Anthony Robbins too. So I get that completely. So, but the idea that this should be fun. I mean, this should be something that we all look forward to, something that we enjoy doing. And back to what you were talking about earlier, if you can have a CEO that is so empowered in the sense that they can disseminate that or help trickle that down to the lower ranks of the company, that's where success comes from. That's where my greatest wins come from. So I know that from experience. My point is that this is what every brand should aspire to, getting everyone in lockstep. And so the Turnkey Sales Story Strategies course is free. The reason I developed it was for that exact reason. Because one of the challenges, one of the things that big brands, their biggest Achilles heel, actually most brands, is that they're not working in lockstep. They don't have the same passion, enthusiasm as the founder when they're talking about their product. So what you're talking about is developing strategies that the CEO can empower, might not necessarily be the right word, but make sure that is part of that contagion goes through the entire system. That's one of the things that, like I said, that thing it makes natural. So how do you go ahead?
I was going to
Yeah.
say there's a great saying that actually I'm going to attribute to Greg Steltenpool, who many people know is the current CEO of Califia Farms. This was back in the mid 90s, and I forget where it was, but Greg made a great statement. He said he was talking about language in this case. He said language is like a virus, and I know the word virus has a whole new meaning today than it did 24 years ago. But he's talking about company culture, and I would substitute also process is a virus in a good way. Good process. You know what process is, and this is something we're talking to CEOs, Dan. It's reframing what certain things mean. Some CEOs might go process. I hate it. I put it in place. My team complains. They feel constricted. But good process creates a focus through which to channel energy.
Love that.
Very metaphysical. It takes away a lot of noise and says, here's where to focus your energy and how to think. And when you create that channel, energy can flow efficiently and quickly. Now, too much process constricts, right? Too much process stops energy flow. So it's how do you find the right amount of process that allows people to focus their thinking, creates a single way of approaching a business that then evolves and builds over time. Because once you process, you start going, oh, there's a rule that sort of violates that process. Should we amend the process to incorporate that thinking, or is the process say don't? So not to get too metaphysical here, but process, once again, bring structure in which energy can flow or a business can flow. With no structure, you have chaos. With too much structure, you have inertia. So, so it's the right set of tools and understanding your business and what are the key things you need your team to focus on. If you give them 10 things to focus on, too many. You give them nothing to focus on, you got a real issue. So it's normally those 2 or 3, 4 key things. When they end up calling KPIs or rules of engagement, they're the things which bind the organization together and allow that, that consistency.
Sorry. Which, by the way, everyone is here. You just got your education. Your church for the week, so you can check that off the box. No, I agree with you completely. That's what I say when I'm talking about what makes natural. This is it. It's that belief. It's that understanding. It's that process. And I never thought of process as being sexy, but you're absolutely right. It's, what are the guardrails that we all operate in? And if everyone is operating in the same, with the same constraints, in other words, marching toward a similar goal, then that's really going to differentiate the brand. When I worked for Unilever, we used to joke about the only way to move up in the company was to literally knock off the guy ahead of you or the gal or whatever. At Kimberly-Clark, we were one big happy family. Well, in the natural brands that I've worked with, it's that same camaraderie. To liken what you were talking about a minute ago with DSD, being able to being able to differentiate whether or not a stop at a particular location makes sense, not only from a profit standpoint, but is it the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do? And what we're talking about, what I'm getting at here is sometimes it may not be profitable, but it may help you in the long run in other areas. But we'll talk about that more in a minute. But being able to leverage that. So when you're working with a CEO, CEOs in big companies tend to have a lot of ego. In smaller companies, and I find that this is one of the challenges, one of the biggest problems that I run into when I work with a small brand, if the CEO has that level of ego where they can't listen and they can't, it's about them more than in other people, then that creates challenges. How do you help, or how would you recommend our listeners today help that CEO, help guide that CEO to make the right decision? Because obviously this creates bottlenecks if it's not dealt with properly. And if it is dealt with properly, if it's handled properly, like you said, this can add rocket fuel to the brand.
Yeah. And first thing I'll say that contextually is I recognize that I have a unique opportunity to influence CEO as a board member. It's tough for someone who works for that CEO. So
Right.
I do not want to minimize the unique position I get to have. When I come on a board, it is almost always, or is always, through the CEO. It's not through an investor putting me on a board. I don't even entertain those discussions, quite honestly. Occasionally I will, but because my trust with the CEO and my approach, which requires a CEO to truly allow me into his inner world, if he thinks I'm there overseeing him for someone else's capital or some other reason, that's a very tough place to start with. So I sort of have an unwritten rule, which is I come, whether it's meeting at Caitlin Smith Simple Mills, at a trade show over 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden we're talking about a board involvement, or whether it's, John Sebastiani, whatever it is, it's coming from them. And I'm always looking for something which they may not see themselves, which is some deeper part of them which knows there's a bigger game they want to play. And I always think about Kobe Bryant when I think about this. And I think about, Michael Jordan. I think about players who are incredible high performance athletes who wanted someone like a Phil Jackson, who could help them not be better shooters, not be better dribblers, but understand how to win championships and understand the team psychology involved, and understand their own role in changing their own mind frame and mindset about what makes them most valuable to the team and winning. So I'm always looking for a CEO, even if to external observers, they may not. I've worked with some pretty controversial CEOs in the sense of they're polarizing at times. People go, oh my God, he must be tough to work with. But I start once again with the presupposition that everyone is doing the best they can with that they have access to in themselves. Sounds a little West Coast, I realize, but I look at it as like a golfer. If you send me out on a golf course with just a driver, and I'm on the putting green and I pull out my driver because the only club I have in my bag, you might go, that guy is freaking crazy. Well, guess what? If that's the only club in my bag, it's a pretty rational choice. So if I meet a CEO who's used to getting control of a situation through anger, and that's the tool they've used their whole life, and it's helped them get to where they are, I shouldn't be surprised when their response to a situation is anger, even though I'm sitting there saying, wow, that's really crazy. He just yelled at his head of sales in front of the whole team. So I start with the position which says, once again, everyone's doing the best they can with what they have access to. And my job is to put more clubs, more aspects of who they are, and more elements into their bag. So if I can teach them how to tap into their curiosity, how to tap into their patience, how to tap into their humility, and put all those clubs in their bags, so they pick the right club for the right shot, i.e. the right decision, the right way to deal with a certain individual person, situation, I'm giving them more choices versus less. So my job is not to take away from a leader things that have worked for them to get them where they are. It's to say, hey, that's all available to you. If you need to be angry at times and that's the right club for that shot, great. I want you to have that in your bag. But I also want to put in the other parts of how a leader can be, so you can then master those and apply those at the right time, at the right place, get the optimal outcome, and one that makes you succeed and also feel good about your decision. Because I will tell you, people who have to pull that driver out on the green aren't happy about the decision. They're like, that's the only club I got in my bag. So that's the fun thing I get to do. I get to expand their sense of possibility about how they can show up. I'm not making anything wrong in how they are. I'm giving them just more choices so they can make better decisions. And that's a much different approach than coming in and saying, that's right, that's wrong, you were bad there, you were good there. That's not my game. My game is helping them see how as they evolve and grow as leaders, their menu of choice expands greatly. And with that greater menu of choice, you'll make the right decision. I'll help you make the right decision at that point. But let's get some beef on that menu next to the chicken. And then we
I
can
got
choose
it.
whether we beer for chicken for dinner. But if there's only chicken on the menu, you're gonna choose chicken every time. So it's a real process for me. And as someone, if I was back in the role of working with a CEO, once again, when you get in conflict, you're probably not getting anywhere. Listen, say, okay, I see that vantage point. Always just take a second and go, hey, I appreciate that perspective. I see why you're seeing that from the CEO seat. Let me tell you what I'm seeing in that Kroger meeting I was in. Let me give you a little more flavor here. So it might take you, depending on where you are in the organization, just a little empathy goes a long way. A little less defensiveness goes a long way, and just sort of saying, hey, I see that. And then adding your viewpoint in. So there's the whole tone element to me, which is so important in how you approach people. And it really starts from a starting point of non-judgment and curiosity about yourself, about others, why they're doing what they're doing or saying what they're saying. And then opening up the opportunity for a conversation.
Sounds like we're both also disciples of Stephen Covey, which I love that. So listen to be understood. I love the
Disciple.
analogy. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I love the analogy that you made because this makes so much sense. And this is why this is important. So then an effective leader, hopefully, this is what makes natural. Hopefully, what you share with the leader is contagious enough where that leader then wants to share that with his team, empower his team. And that's, in my opinion, let me know your thoughts. This is how you get an optimized team. This is how, when you've got people working for you, even at the lowest levels of the company, doing this type of work and this kind of thought leadership, this is how you set your brand apart from other companies. Your thoughts?
No, totally. I know I tend to do metaphors here and there because I find them, for me, very valuable to
Sure.
understand. I think of the movie Inception. If anyone's out there seen it, maybe many of you have. Leonardo DiCaprio, great movie, where the whole idea is there's an idea and you want to plant that idea in someone's mind. But to plant it in their mind, you need to get through their sentinels and down to the fourth level and plant it in their mind. And then it becomes their idea. And why that's important to me is if a CEO is taking my idea that he hasn't really bought into and then trying to spread that across the organization, it's not going to work. There's going to be
No.
challenges to the idea. There's going to be bumps in the road. And if he's not committed to that idea, he or she will resort back to where they were. So my job is to, if I have an idea or something I want to share that's the ground's not fertile for it initially, it's like, oh, Brad, we can't do that, or nobody will think like that, or all the things the sentinels say to keep the idea from getting planted. I got to work through those. I'm like, what's the belief there? What's going on underneath that? Why is that threatening to give your team more autonomy, make a key decision? What is it? What's the fear? What's underneath it all? And I work through those things very patiently. It's not about. I want things to change quickly, but I want them to change in a way that they're going to stick. And sometimes that takes a CEO going through a process of stepping into a new idea or a new approach and respecting their pace of change. But once that idea is planted in a way that really they understand and they align with, then they do their thing. I mean, leaders are great creators. They're there for a reason. They are creators. They're willing to go through walls. They're willing to fight the fight that is, anybody starting a food company is borderline insane. I mean, if you think about it, to build a $10 million food company with a product that retails at $5, which means you're wholesaling at $2 roughly, let's say, you got to get 5 million times a year people who don't even know who you are when you start your company to pick up your product. Now, it might be, might not be 5 million unique customers, obviously, but the point is you are going out there and trying to get people to totally change a behavior on a huge scale to build a huge scale company. That's a real challenge. Like $100 million food company, that's 40 million times for that product I gave you, an example of a product at $2 wholesale. 40 million times a year someone grabs it off the shelf or orders it online, wherever. That is a massive transformation you're trying to create. And that's why so few food companies succeed at that level. You are really changing their behavior At the same time, there's 10 other competitors trying to change it too in their direction, and 10 other competitors trying to retain and defend their position. It's really hard. So, yeah, so a lot of it really is about having a CEO and working with them to really get, once again, their internal clarity, that allows an idea to really stick and be sustainable. Hence, they'll go through the hard work to build that process. Because the hard work of taking that call at 8 o'clock from a key salesperson and patiently walking through why they're doing what they're doing, because they understand it. It's me. If it's my idea, they're not going to understand. They're going to go, well, I'm not sure why we're doing this. You're right. We should change back. So I think it really is building, that internal clarity.
And thank you for sharing that. This is why, again, this is what, and from my position, this is what makes natural. We have these unique opportunities where we don't have all those layers of complexity to deal with, to trip over, et cetera. So one of the greatest compliments I've had, kind of reinforcing what you're saying, is when someone came to me and said that my greatest strength as a leader is I was able to take my idea and make it their own.
Yeah.
And that's magic. And the reason, and I'm not trying to brag or whatever, but my point is, this is how you get a high powered sales team. This is how you add rocket fuel to your brand. So think about it this way, that if I am a brand, a traditional brand, traditional way of thinking, the notion is that this is my ship, I'm driving it, everyone else has to, fall in line. Theory XYZ, if you've ever read the book Theory Z, this is the point behind that. So Theory X essentially says that you're an idiot, you're going to do the job, you're going to do it wrong, I'm going to have to come back in and fix it for you because you're an idiot. Theory Y says, well, you're probably going to do it right, but I'm still going to keep an eye on you. Theory Z says, I'm going to empower you to make decisions for you that are right for the company, on behalf of the company, and I'm going to trust you because I believe that you believe it's, we're in that same wavelength. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and the real cherry on top of that hot fudge sundae is when they do that. You as a leader don't say, I told you so. You go, that's a great idea. I mean, that you want to win points. I'm going to pass that story. I was going to basically say, it's nothing more beautiful than to see your team adopt an idea as their own.
Yes.
But then if you see come in and say, look, I told you so, you've taken all the benefit out of it. Your response then is, that's a great approach. I love that. That's all you got to say. And they feel empowered. You created what you want to create, and you don't need to claim credit for it at that point. So that restraint, that final step is the critical point to having it be, of huge value. So,
well, and you're right. And a lot of people that I've known in the mainstream world, they have a tough time not retaining credit for it. And that's such a hard thing for them to let go of. But yet this is exactly why, when we were talking initially, why I put in that quote, that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. The point is, imagine if you're a brand and you're very siloed, very focused on you're achieving an objective, getting on shelf or whatever. And you've got a team that works like we're talking about on your behalf to help you find blind spots and help you identify opportunities. This is how you accelerate any of the opportunities that you have in front of you. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. I mean, part of the journey for leaders is from being a doer and an executor to being an empowerer.
Yes.
And see, when they talk about there's certain CEOs for certain stages, it sort of is a lot about that. It's if the CEO keeps trying to be an executor, once he builds a senior team who's been brought on to do what they do really well, but he doesn't let them do what they're trained to do because he keeps trying to execute for them, never going to build a senior team. And it's going to ultimately hurt the company's growth, what the CEO's goals are. They may not see it like that, but that's underneath the surface. And, if you think about it and take a step back, whenever a CEO, or it's not just CEO, whenever an organization, you have people reporting to you and you ultimately say something like, look, I'll just take care of it. Or you make some statement that's like, if it's going to get done right, I got to do it. You're playing the hero. So you think you're a hero. We think we're heroes when we do that. But always realize when you make yourself the hero, because you're telling everybody else around you, you're telling them they're incompetent.
Right.
And when a CEO tries to be a hero, or anyone within a company, if the cost everyone else around you feels they are being told they're not good enough, they're not competent, why in the blank would they run through walls for you 2 weeks later when you need them to work an extra 3 hours at night to get a presentation done? Why would they do that? You're totally demotivating them. You're totally sending a message to them underneath the surface about who they are and how effective they are. So, once again, as a leader, and all of us are leaders in organizations, whether you are a field salesperson, helping a retailer think about something or making a decision at that level, whether you're a VP of sales or you're CEO or you're a board member, we're all leading and we're all learning concurrently. So as a leader, just be so aware that sometimes when you're winning battles, you're losing wars. And
Well
the
said.
war is to create a cohesive, aligned organization where everyone's optimizing their potential effectiveness. And if you're doing things which win battles by saying, "Oh, I'm just going to do that. I'll take care of this." You sort of think you're being whatever it is, like I said, the hero, but really what you're being you're really just empowering people. And that works all right when you're a 2-person company or 1-person company. But when you're managing a 100-person company, those 9 other people than you are the people who are going to make it win or lose. Your job as a leader is to guide them, channel their energy, give them the right tools. But ultimately, if you're the hero and 99 of them are incompetent, you're not going to have a very focused, excited organization to work for you.
Thank you for sharing that. In fact, it kind of reminds me, I'm also a disciple of Kevin Peters. And one of the things that he said, one of the that I keep thinking back to, is that a leader for a particular company was talking to a line worker. And in the grand scheme of things, you would think this person would be at the very lowest, bottom point of the food chain, and asked her what she wanted to be and or what she wanted to say on her business card. And she said she wanted to be the supreme leader. So they did that little simple thing, but it empowered her. And the point is, this is how you develop high performance teams. So thank you for sharing that. I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. What are your thoughts? What are the thoughts that you have for everyone in terms of how do you suggest or how would you recommend that they build a high performance team? And what are the things that you would recommend them start thinking about as they're beginning to grow and scale and develop those teams and go forward?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm going to go to some core characteristics. Every company is different in terms of what you need to build to some extent, given your category dynamics, given the space you're in. The first superpowers are listening and empathy. If you're not getting the most out of everybody on your team and they're not feeling engaged and excited to contribute, you're losing a lot of effectiveness and probably increasing turnover, et cetera. The second thing we talked about a bit was, really think about what's the right level of process for non-process. Once again, a non-sexy term to some people, but geez, what's the right amount? It's I love all the analogies you can have. It's like a song. All the notes are flying around. There's no song. A song needs some structure, needs a bass line. It needs the drum to have some rhythm to it. So how do you create that rhythm in the business, which process helps with, that then allows people to do the big guitar solo and really enjoy that. But you need that mixture of good, well thought out process. The other thing I think about is everyone organization is the key job in many ways is really to be ROI managers, return on investment. By that, I mean, every company has a limited amount of time, capital, people, energy. So the more people think about decisions in terms of what creates the greatest return on investment for the company, and not just financial, right? In a company, you're trying to build brand value. You're trying to build value as a company. And there are times when a decision, which once again is the right short-term decision, could be the wrong long-term decision. We mentioned that in terms of that DSD driver who wants to stop at that one account, but long-term, it's not really a good account that can really fund itself theoretically. So I think it's always thinking about sort of limited resources. How do I get the most out of them? There's a saying in our business here 1,000 times over, which is cash is king. I don't agree with that one, actually. No company in our space ever got successful by sitting on a bunch of cash. What's king is deploying cash intelligently. That's how you build a great company. It's not by having cash, it's by deploying it with the greatest impact. When you do that, You are things that investors and acquirers love. You're capital efficient, we say. And capital is the gas for a business, and efficiency is like miles per gallon. How do you get the most miles per gallon out of your gas? Being your capital, or being your people's time, or being your opportunities that present themselves. So really thinking about decisions through an ROI lens and what creates the greatest impact for the business, and recognize that decision's made at every level. It's not just CEO decision. Everyone on this call every day has a decision about how to allocate their time and their energy. And the more a company thinks in that form and builds tools to do that, once again, whether it's your tool, Dan, around trade spending as an investment, whether it's a tool around the cost to enter a new account in terms of slotting, how do you think about that? Whether it's an investment in a new piece of equipment for a manufacturing plant, they're all ROIs. So I want to develop companies where there's a great ROI approach, to it. And then, like I said, this process piece, and I've a saying I like that I haven't used in a while, which is called nail it, then scale it. A lot of times in the first $5 million, $10 million revenue for a company, it is about putting in place a foundation that can be leveraged. And part of that is the process piece, but you're trying to build a foundation whereby you can hire 10 new people in, and they come in and you have something for them to step into. You have a playbook that they're stepping into. Just like when you draft people on a football team, there's a playbook they're stepping into. They don't redefine the way the football team operates. They step into a playbook. And so when you nail that model and you understand how you go to market, you understand where you're most effective in your merchandising, you understand, what the best suppliers are for you, get that nailed in that first couple years, then you can scale really efficiently, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and therefore apply your time, resources to those things you can be effective at in terms of the competitive environment, in terms of the category. And so nail it, then scale it.
Love that. That makes so much sense. And thank you for saying cash is not king. I mean, I agree with you completely. I hate that. I hate it because it overlooks or overshadows what matters most. To your point, if you're a brand and you got deep pockets, you can buy volume, you can buy velocity, you can buy customers, you can buy sales. However, if you're a small brand, you need to be efficient. You need to be scrappy. And this is exactly what we're getting at here. I know we're coming up close to the top of the hour. I'm sorry we haven't answered any questions. If you've got questions, please reach out to me. My email address is on there, and I'll make sure that Brad and I get them and get back to you. So thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any parting thoughts?
I know we covered some detailed stuff, some philosophical stuff. I just think, seeing as a leader or as a company that you are in constant learning mode and really dialing up curiosity about how people around you are deciding things and who they are goes a long way. I keep coming back to that because, once again, for me in my role as a board member, that is where I start with. I sit in board meetings where you have a lot of really smart people with different ideas, and that can either devolve into conflict and inertia, or you start weaving through and finding out, why does that person think that way? Because it's amazing. Everyone has, I go back to this point, everyone has good reasons for why they think the way they do. Now, they might not be expressed the right way. They might be because they have a limited set of options on how they want to think, or there's some things there, knowledge that would help them evolve the way they think. But ultimately, everyone wants to win. All of us want to be connected to our organizations. All of us want to succeed in our jobs. We all want that. So when you see that not happening, don't go to the assumption that they're just, not a good person, or they just don't want to change. You got to find out what's preventing that change and how you can help them to evolve. And if you as a leader are always taking that approach, A, you'll get more out of your organization, but B, when it does come time to let someone go, it won't be because you as a leader didn't make the effort to understand how you could help them get better. And I think the CEOs I know who have the biggest challenge when it comes to, firing decisions, not to end on that note, but I will, are those who haven't gone through that process of really asking themselves, what can I do to help this person succeed? And sort of for a moment stepping into their shoes, that empathy, that listening. And I always I once there were some hard decisions I made where I let someone go, but I always felt by the time I got there that hey, I tried my best to create a a place where they succeed. And if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. And so maybe it's better for both people that went a different direction. But it really came from that first part, which is a CEO's job as a servant. And it's to be a servant lead organization and always ask, how can I help another person unlock their full potential? Because you know what, as a leader and a founder, you get the benefit of that more than anybody else does. You're the one who owns half the equity. I mean, the rules of the game, you win by them winning. So put yourself in the background a little bit and empower them versus them looking for them to empower you.
Love that. I used to, when I was in that position years ago, thankfully I'm not there anymore, used to always try to be in a position where the person that was on the ropes knew why and understood why long before we had to have that conversation. The point being is that if you do, in my opinion, if you do an effective job of coaching and nurturing and working with that person, then they know better than anyone else. They know ahead of time that they're not cutting it. And if
Oh,
they're savvy, and hopefully you've made this available to them, they know that they can come to you for those additional insights. So,
yeah,
so thank you.
you're
Your
welcome.
thoughts?
I was going to say, and they know it's not personal at that
Yeah,
point. That's when it's so tough in those situations when it feels personal.
yeah,
And if they know that you fought the battle with them, they know you've gone out of your way to give them the tools to succeed, and they haven't. Like I said, at that point, both sides probably look at each other and go, I mean, maybe it might be a little emotion around it, but go, hey, it's better. Let's put you in a place where you can win. And if it's not in our company, hey, let's figure out a way you can go on to your next thing and win. And but that comes just really hard to have when it feels like it's personal and they never felt listened to and they always felt you were the hero and they were the incompetent one. Yeah, I guess you're going to get a really a
yeah,
really angry employee when you tell them you're letting them go because
yeah.
they so just treating people well on the way just creates just so much more ease in how the business can evolve and through addition or subtraction of people, right?
And it goes back to how you show up and how authentic and everything else. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for coming on today. Again, if you've got any questions, please send me an email. I'll make sure we get them answered. And just a recap, buddy. So thank you so much for everyone being here. And I look forward to next week. Check out the schedule on the events page. And I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. I want to thank Brad for coming on today and for sharing his wisdom and his insights. If you want to learn more about Brad, one of the best ways to do that is on his LinkedIn profile. I'll be certain to put a link to it on the show notes and on the podcast webpage. Don't forget, today's free downloadable guide is actually a cool tool. Go to my website and click on the bar that says Free Promotion Analysis Tool. That's going to give you insights that other brands don't have access to. And check out the article that covers all the key things that you need to be thinking about as you're thinking about your trade marketing strategy. If you want to learn more about this, for the podcast show notes and to learn more about this, go to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 196. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.